This week, I am absolutely pumped to bring you a podcast episode with a friend of mine from a very long time ago. Now, this guy, when I first started my company in 2003, it's the first time I met our friend Kevin. And Kevin used to come to my office and we would sit and hang out. And like I was, and I'll actually use this to introduce you, Kevin. So I had you as my friend, this entrepreneur by myself in an office. You flew out from Denver or Fort Collins, I think you lived in at the time. You're in credit reporting, and I end up like we kind of became office buddies because I had this empty space. And then you taught all of the classes, and yet we're not going to talk about credit reporting at all today. But like that's our origin story of our friendship. What am I leaving out?
Well, I'll tell you that what you did is, so I took that job with the factual data, and my territory was Oregon, Southern Washington, and Idaho, and it was a dead territory. I mean, it was dead. And they were like, hey, just go pioneer it and kill it. And I forgot how we met, but we met, and you were like, well, every week I teach 25 mortgage people. And I was like, no, that sounds like an easy pickings for me. But then you and we realized we were kind of similar people and we came from the same world and saw the same thing. And so there was like this really neat space together where we also, I think the other thing we both really enjoy is educating people and sharing our experience. So yeah, that's how that all started. And then just kind of blossomed from there. And
Yeah.
here we, yeah.
And now you're an author, and now I see this. I mean, I follow you on the socials, and I see that you're on the news. Like they're interviewing you as an expert now. Nothing
Nothing
mortgage
mortgage
related at
related at
all.
all.
But I love that we've stayed in touch because you fascinate me with the work that you do. And so we're going to talk some about that. But what's really interesting is the other day, or I guess a few weeks ago, we released a podcast episode, and I want you to go back and listen to it because I think you'll find it fascinating. But we interviewed our friend Randy, and Randy talked about his addiction to alcohol, and it's the most like wild story just because he really did a good job of explaining how he lied to himself for so long, and he finally just went, I guess this is how I die, and then just kept drinking. And I'll never forget when he said that, I went, I need to talk to Kevin because you are in this world, and I'd love for you to listen to that and give me your feedback. But you're in the addiction world. In fact, your book is about dealing with addiction in families, is it not?
Yes, I actually have two. The first book that I wrote in 2017 is called Chronic Hope: Parenting the Addicted Child.
Yeah.
It's a quickie. It's really more of a how-to, which is really based on a lot of my experience. And then in 2020, since we were all just hanging out doing nothing, although I'll tell you, COVID was great for therapy. Business really pumped.
Yeah.
And I wrote another book using the same sort of front title, Chronic Hope, and then it's called Families in Addiction. And it's very much sort of a recipe for if you have someone that's struggling, here are the three parts. There's the triaging the crisis, there's addressing the family, and then reconciling the team back together. And and again, it's based on a lot of my own personal experience. But yeah. I mean,
It's so rad.
you push me and I'll go.
Yeah, well, I want to start with. So I was telling Kirk about you. I'm like, oh, this guy's amazing. Like he's done all these things, and he's such a. You're probably saving so many lives right now with the things that you've done. And then I went to tell him what your origin story was, and it occurred to me, I don't think you and I have ever had that conversation. So I want you to tell me, like,
Okay.
how did you end up in this world? Because I know it's from your personal experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. And if, be sure and cut me off if
You're
I need to
good.
take a breath. Or so I was born and raised in Palo Alto, California. I was born at Stanford Hospital in 1964, and on the outside, my dad was very successful in the Silicon Valley, and he sold envelopes, and a guy walked into his office in the 70s, one of our neighbors, and said, "Hey, Walt, I'm looking for a prop. Um, this is a floppy disk. See how it goes inside this envelope, and see how it tears the envelope apart. They're losing. My clients are losing data. Um, and so, can you help me with that?" And my dad's like, "Ooh, I sell envelopes." This is back in a time when everybody had an entire room full of stationery and paper and all sorts of stuff. Um, and literally, I'm not making this up. The week before, the DuPont guys were in my dad's office in California saying, "Hey, Walt, this is Tyvek. Can you sell plastic paper?" And my dad was like, "Plastic paper? That's crazy." And a week later, he called them. He's like, "You still need a West Coast guy to sell the plastic paper stuff?" And they were like, "Yeah, you want it?" And he's like, "Yeah." So from the 70s to the 90s, if you bought anything that was wrapped in Tyvek, not the FedEx stuff, but the, anything else, my dad brokered it. And I mean, he's like, "I had a machine in the basement just printing money."
Oh my
And he
gosh.
goes, "People tried to go around me every day. And the one thing about DuPont, they're like, nope, that's our guy. They wouldn't even return the phone calls." And so I grew up in that house, big, beautiful home, super successful, great. Everything was wonderful. Palo Alto is just one of those amazing, beautiful, incredible places. My high school is across the street from Stanford University. But we had a big secret. And the big secret is that my mom struggled with prescription drugs and a lot of mental health issues. Um, so as kids, and I mean like elementary school, um, I almost said grammar school, but they don't call it that anymore. And we came home and we never knew if we had mom, stoned mom, or passed out mom. And so we just learned how to deal with that. And that was just kind of our reality. I have one sister who's a couple of years younger than me. And that was just our reality, we just kind of tripped along that way. And that's what we did. Around 13, I was a Boy Scout and I would go on these trips with the scouts and the troop. And there was always the older guys got to camp further away from the parents. And I knew something was going on because they were laughing and hooting and hollering and having a good time. And when I got to turn 13, they brought me into that side of the street and they were drinking and smoking weed. And I was just like, oh, where has this been? This is great.
At 13.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Most people in recovery will tell you 12, 13, 14 is where it started, you know. Um, and I didn't, I mean, I wasn't like hustling on the streets at that point. I was, living your typical upper middle class white boy town, smoking weed and drinking on the weekends and going to high school, being a fairly good student, being an athlete, playing water polo. For me, the wheels came off the wagon in 1982 when I enrolled at the University of Southern California. I'll tell you two stories, and then we'll jump out of the drinking stuff.
Before you do that, Kevin, I want to ask a clarifying question. So, how old were you? Do you recall how old you were when you noticed something was not normal at home with respect to coming home and seeing your mom either stoned or asleep or?
I look back on it now, and I would tell you that I probably noticed it then, because it just seemed a little weird because we weren't like the other houses. I would go to my friends' houses, and they had more traditional housewife mom. Dinner was on the table, the place was clean, da 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 da, and I was always gravitating towards that, because I was like, this is cool. But I don't know if I ever put two and two together, you
Mhm.
know. But I can look back at my behaviors and be like, oh, that's interesting. I was really gravitating towards my friends who, by the way, a lot of them were Mormon, and so I would gravitate into these homes where there was this, loving, caring environment, and there was food, and you can come and go as you please. You're always welcome here, and there's a parent to hang out and talk with, and so I would say that's probably, I don't know that I ever put two and two together till later.
Interesting.
But now I look back and I'm like, oh, that's weird. You know what's interesting? The more that I've done social media and interviews and the books, I hear from people and from when I grew up with all the time. And they're
Whoa.
like, hey, let me tell you what was going on in my house.
Oh my gosh. These perfect houses?
Yeah. These multi-million dollar homes. I mean, our house. My dad bought our house in 1970 for 50 grand. Thought he was getting screwed, and sold it in 2002 for $2 million cash. And now it's worth like $7 million, and it's just crazy. Um, but so then I went to college, and in college, I mean, so okay, here's the two stories about college. Um, the fall of 1982 is when Steve Wozniak put on the S Festival, and that was the same weekend as freshman orientation. And my friends were like, "Hey, you want to go to the S Festival, or do you want to go to freshman orientation?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? I'll drive." And we spent the 3 days at this. I mean, that was legendary. I mean, that was a good decision, to be honest with you. That was a legendary time. I had the time of my life, and I saw everybody. I mean, everybody was there. It was incredible. And but that's how I started college. And don't go to orientation and learn stuff. Go party. And 6 years later, my parents wanted to know when I was going to graduate, and I was kind of curious myself. And so I turned in the paperwork. I know that always gets a smile out of like 6, huh?
I didn't know. I'm like, you guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I don't know, And so I turned in the paperwork, and because back then you turned in paperwork, and you normally get a letter back that says, "Congratulations, you're going to graduate in May of 1988," or, "Oh, hey, you need to fill in these credits." I got a handwritten letter like, "What are you, nuts? You're not even registered at this university. You owe us 10 grand. You have a 1.1 GPA. We're past triple secret probation. We have a picture of you. have you have you seen this guy?" And you're on every level of academic probation. And I read that, and I was like, "Oh, I'm graduating in May." And so I rented the cap and gown. I ordered the announcements, and I sent them out. And this was like in December of '87. And I announced to the world that I would be graduating in May. Because that's the best I could come up with. And I mean, I wasn't like masterminding this. I'm not that guy. I was like, I'm graduating. What do you do when you graduate? Order announcements, get a cap and gown.
Oh my
Okay, cool.
gosh.
you know,
If I
and
learned
that
nothing
is,
else out of this conversation, Kevin, your reference to triple secret probation has just made my day. So if we talk about nothing else, this
I can quote that movie backwards.
you and me both, my friend, you and me both. Sadly.
I remember at their 25th anniversary watching, oh God, one of the guys, I forgot which one, being interviewed, and he's like, "Let me be clear to you. We were all at the University of Oregon, staying in this old beat up hotel. The stuff that we did in the hotel made the movie look tame."
Oh my gosh.
I was like, "Oh my God, how did I miss that?" I ordered the cap and gown. I sent out the announcements, get all the money and the presents and everything. I think I got typewriters. It's 1988. I'm like, "What the hell am I going to do with this antique?" And I on Thursday, May 9th, 1988, I faked my graduation from college. I sat in, my family flew in, right, and the whole thing. And I sat in the major, there's like 5,000 people graduating from the big one. And we all stood up and sat down. And then I went to my satellite program because, I mean, if I'm going to go, I'm going to go, and I chose economics. And so when you fill out the paperwork for the dean to say your name off, right? I put Kevin Petersen, economics, dean's list. Why not?
Go big or go home.
That's right. That's right.
1.0 is all you need to get on the dean's list at Stanford. That makes sense.
SC.
Oh, sorry, an SC. That's right.
Well, I was on a dean's list. It just wasn't that dean.
It was triple secret probation.
Right. And yeah, my dad said that's what tipped him off, actually. He's like, "There's no way that kid's on a dean."
Oh my God.
And then I went back to Palo Alto and bartended at really nice restaurants and sold weed, because that's what you did. and this was, way before the day. And that lasted. So in the parlance of recovery, we talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So that's what it was like. So I want you to see the stories there. Um, I chose a 3-day party instead of orientation. And then 6 years later, I was wasted out of my mind pulling the biggest caper I could ever come up with, you know. That's college for me, you know. Um, 2 years later, I'm at a family reunion in Templeton, California, which is right next to San Luis Obispo, which is where my family's from. And I'm drunk the entire time. I mean, I'm drunk the entire time. And my dad says, "Hey, let's drive home together." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." And he throws me the keys to his new BMW, and he's like, "You drive." And it's like a 4-hour drive back to Palo Alto. I'm like, "Okay." And the first 5 minutes of the 4-hour drive went like this: Kevin, you're my only son, and I love you, but I don't believe a word out of your mouth. You're a liar, a cheat, and a thief, a drug addict, and alcoholic, and your mom and your sister and I have had a vote, and you're off the island. And until you're ready to change your way of life, we're not. We're done. You're out. And I wasn't living at home. I had a job. Like I said, I had 2 jobs, and I was living in an apartment. But they were like, "We're done." And one of the key phrase that my dad said is, "We're done participating in your suicide." And I
Oh
was
my
just like, "Oh,
gosh.
What was your mom's status at this point, Kevin?
still doing her thing." Um, my mom never really got sober. That she had moments of health and mental health, but then always falling back in. Because to be totally blunt, she never picked up a program of recovery. She never engaged in anything other than, you know, I'll go to a therapist and I'll eat better. You know, um,
Interesting that your dad was willing to address your issue, but not willing to address the elephant in the room.
yeah, yeah. Well, that became an ongoing theme
Sure.
throughout. You know, um, so,
But you're
uh,
driving at this point? Like he had you drive knowing you're drunk and he's telling you these
oh no,
things.
I was sober.
Okay, good.
I
Okay.
was, I wasn't. No, no,
I
no.
was
I
thinking
was.
the same thing. I mean, it's a
No,
little
no, no, no,
scared
no. It was
straight
like
stuff
Sunday.
right there.
I know.
No. It was Sunday morning. It wasn't. I wasn't
Okay,
like.
okay. Yeah.
I think that was kind of the goal. It was like, we'll make him drive, so he can't get drunk. To get
Caught him
out.
at a sober moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and um, so that was August of 1990, and they had said this stuff to me before, and I was like, "Oh, we're going to play this game," and blah. And this time they held their ground, and they were like, "Nope, you're out." And so I did what real true tough guy alcoholics do. 6 weeks later, I called my mom and started crying, and "You don't love me, this is BS, and how dare you, and this is your blah, blah, blah." And they were waiting for that, and they were like, "Oh, well, tell you what, why don't you start seeing a therapist with your dad, and then maybe we can start negotiating." And I was like, "Therapist? I've been seeing those idiots since I was 14," because the environment I grew up in is when a kid has a problem, you don't sit and talk about it. You send them off to somebody you pay to talk about it. And so I was like, I've been seeing those clowns for years. And so, January of 1991, I started seeing this therapist with my dad, who I didn't know was engineering all this behind the scenes. Okay. And then a really funny thing happened every Thursday morning at 10 o'clock in Menlo Park, California. I started telling the truth, and my dad started telling the truth. And I came clean about the whole, USC graduation thing and everything. I just put all the cards on the table, everything. And he did too. And we had this really amazing time from January to May where we both just really put all our cards on the table and became very, very, very close. And then at the end of April, my mom and dad went away for the weekend. So the therapist was like, well, why don't you come in anyway? And I was like, okay. So I came in. I'm still drinking. I'm still drinking and using and bartending and selling weed. Um, and but it's really you'll hear this phrase in recovery. There's nothing worse than a belly full of booze and a head full of sober. So I'm going to this therapy, and I'm like, I got to change my life. I got to change my life. And then I go get drunk or high, and I'm like, this isn't working. This isn't working anymore. Oh my God, what am I going to do? This isn't working. So I went into this therapist's office. I think it was May 2nd, 1991. And he's like, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, oh, I don't care. What do you want to talk about? And he's like, well, I have something I want to talk about. I'm like, look, dude, it's 10 a.m. I'm hungover. What do you want to talk about? And he's like, you're an alcoholic and a drug addict and you need help. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Jigs up. I quit. What do I got to do? And I mean, and I had heard this from bosses and friends and girlfriends and therapists and doctors. I mean, repeatedly. So this time I was like, you're right. What do I do? He's like, you go to AA. That's where the solution is. And I was like, okay, and I didn't, you know. And my sober date is May 5th, 1991. So I did quit drinking. And if you want to know who gets sober on Cinco de Mayo in California,
You're the only one.
Ironically, that is my birthday.
No
Wow.
way.
Cinco de Mayo.
Wow. Yeah.
33?
How old were you
33 years ago.
33. How old were you
27.
when you had this epoch?
I was 27.
27 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. And so here's the thing. Now this has probably got a lot. So, da 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 da. I decided I was like, there was a woman that used to come to the bar who was like an office executive manager person. And she's like, hey, what are you doing with this job, bartending? I mean, what the hell's wrong with you? And I'm like, well, and she's like, give me your resume. And I gave her my resume and she looks at it like in 10 seconds. She's like, what does it mean attended USC? People that go to college but graduated. And I'm like, yeah, funny thing about that. And she's like, you don't need a job. You need to finish college. And I was like, oh, okay. And so here's the thing. And I think this is really important on the theme of what you guys got going on here, is every time I have come to a crossroads in my life, I have been supplied with what I call angels that show up and say, let me help you. Because I was sincere about, I need help. That therapist and my dad were the first ones, you know. We had a family friend back then in 1991 who was the secretary to the president at USC. And if you know anything about major institutions, the president doesn't run the place. She did, you know, just like, and then USC is the largest private employer in the Los Angeles County. It's huge. And she calls the shot. It just did. And she and I were friends. Her son and I were drinking buddies. Her husband and my dad were drinking buddies back in the day. And I called her up and I said, Liz, it's Kevin. I'm coming back to LA and I need a job. Can I meet with you? And she's like, yeah, sure. So on June 3rd, 1991, at 8 in the morning, I walked into Liz's office and I said, hi, Liz, it's me. She's like, so good to see you. I said, hey, I don't know if you realize this. I never graduated from USC. And she started laughing. And she's like, Kevin, I'm the president's secretary. I am so well aware of everything. And she's like, I pulled all your stuff and I looked at everything. And, she was just like, oh, honey, isn't that cute?
She's like, if you turn around, your picture's right there on the wall behind you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And she's like, look, I want to be clear with you. I have called in a favor at every single department that needs a favor. But first things first, I want you to go to the athletic department and go see this guy. He's waiting for you. And I ran over there and I walked in and this guy stood up and he looked at me and he said, hi, I'm Ron. I'm an alcoholic. I want to take you to a meeting. And I was like, oh, honey, isn't that cute? She's like, if you turn around, your picture's right there on the wall behind you. And she was just like, oh, honey, isn't that cute?
I just got the chills.
Oh, I know. And he looked
Wow.
just like me, you know, and I was like, that sounds great. And that started my adventure in sobriety and the 12-step recovery. I've been sober since May 5th, but I started going to AA and I've never stopped. That's been a salvation for me. Um, Liz said, you're going to need to talk to all these people. She goes, one of the things you need to understand about USC is if you work here in a real job, school's free. Because my parents were like, oh, we think that's great. No more money for you. You got 6 years of private school out of us. And somehow you're still in your first semester of your junior year. I was like, and I had a 1.1 GPA. But she stood over me and said, look, here's the deal. If you stay sober and you get it together, I will fight for you. I will absolutely fight for you. And I was like, okay. And so I got a job. I got a real job managing what we called the payment plan at USC. This is 1991. In the January of 1992, I started taking classes. And there's plenty of interesting stories about everything that was going on in my life then and where I was living. But the bottom line was my day was very simple. I woke up, I went to work, I went to AA, I went to class, and I went to AA. And I did that for the next 3 or 4 years of my life. And then a funny thing happened along that way. In August of 1994, I graduated from the University of Southern California.
Wow.
Wow.
And I
Slightly
got
delayed.
really 12 years, as one of my good friends is like, most people that go to college for 12 years, you call them doctor. And I'm like, you can call me doctor. um, and it's right there, actually. That's my diploma. So funny thing along the way is that they were like, oh, you can't retake your classes and get an A, you can only get a C. Well, when you have a 1.1 GPA, C's don't help. So I had to go take a bunch of classes, but it was USC. So I thought, screw it. I'll start taking cinema classes. And I did. I had a lot of fun. But I graduated. And then about a year later, I moved. My sister had moved to Boulder and I went to visit. And I was like, whoo, this is beautiful. This was 1994, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so I ended up moving in 1995. I ended up quitting my job and moving to Colorado and sort of starting out on my own. And that's where it was interesting. I'm a natural born salesman. I'm a fifth generation salesman. My dad, my grandpa sold cookies and biscuits for Nabisco in San Jose, California. And I think it's just layer upon layer upon layer. It's just who we are and what we are. And I fell in love and got married in 2002 with a woman that had two little kids. And it was unfortunately, it was a marriage that was never destined to work out. There was just too many outside factors messing with it. And I loved being a dad. Their dad was gone and never coming back. And I loved being dad, but she and I just weren't very good together, is what it comes down to. So here's the thing. And by the way, I'm still going to AA. Still, this is who I am. This is the majority of my life. And I started working in this company that takes me to Oregon every other week, and I meet this guy Ken, and again, an angel appears in my life and says, "Hey, you can do anything you want. You can be anyone you want. You can go anywhere you want." And I watched him do it, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's right." And this was at a time too when these knuckleheads were doing mortgages and making just insane amounts of money. And I'm like, I am so much brighter than these guys, but they're making so much more money than me. And then I delved into the mortgage business for a little bit. And then I kind of realized why they were making so much more money than me. And I was like, ooh, this isn't for me. I can't do this. Blah, 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 blah. Ended up getting divorced. and then started working for commercial real estate people in Denver, blah, 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 sales, sales, sales. 2007 rolls around, and I have sort of I would call it like an epiphany or a midlife crisis or a conscience attack or whatever you want to call it. But I'm 43 years old. I am 16 years sober, and I realize that I'm absolutely unhappy with what I do for a living, and it's just not who I am or what I am. And which is weird for me because the one thing I've always known is I'm a salesman, always. Um, and I sat down and talked to a friend of mine, also in recovery in AA, at same age, same amount of sobriety, who had gone back to school recently to become a nurse. And I was like, Brad, how did you figure that out? And he's like, Kevin, one of the things we talk about actively in the world of recovery is making yourself, of maximum service to God and your fellows, and to helping others. Because I don't think that means once a day for an hour in a meeting. I think that means that's what my career has to be. I need to be helpful to other people. And it just, I was like, yeah, right. And he's like, well, I'm in nursing school. Do you like science? I'm like, I hate science. It's just absolutely the worst thing ever. And I mean, literally hate science. And he's like, I think you should be a therapist. And I was like, yeah, I think so too. And he goes, you love people. And I do. I mean, that was always the thing I liked about sales was helping people solve their problems. And so I went to an open house at Regis University in Denver, a little amazing Jesuit school. And I'm not Catholic, but those guys, they have it going on. And the open house was fascinating. There's about 35, 40 people in there. And they were talking about their academics and the rigorous parts of their academia and their certifications. And I cornered the dean, this guy named John Arman, and I was like, hey, I want to make sure I'm not wasting your time. I'm 43 years old. I'm 16 years sober. I've spent a career in sales, but in my heart of hearts, I can't do it anymore. And this is what I want to do. And I said, and if you guys don't take me, I'm going to go down the street to the Iliff school, the seminary, and I'm going to become a minister. And because I figure that's how you help people. And he looked at me and he's like, Kevin, look around the room. And I was like, okay. He goes, how many men your age are in this room? I said, other than you and me? And he's like, yeah. I said, none. He's like, right. This is like the one place being a middle-aged white guy is to your advantage. We just don't have any therapists that are like you. Plus, you're sober. And I was like, okay. And so I applied and I got in and I said, well, okay, so you're going to want to see my transcript from USC, right? Like, yeah, why? I said, well, there's a story I got to tell you. And he starts cracking up and he's like, write us a letter. He goes, we'll probably put you on probation because we want to make sure you can do the work.
Sure.
And I was like, yeah, and I aced those classes. I mean, my first semester, I was a straight A student through graduate school, which blew my mind, right? Because I barely got through college, and the high school I went to is a public high school. It's one of the top 10 public high schools in the country for academics, and it's not a charter school. It's just a catch. This is where everybody. It's across the street from Stanford, so it's a distorted public, group. But I thought I was mediocre or stupid. And it turns out I'm really bright, and when I'm put in front of the subject that I love, so I started school in January of 2008. And during the fall of 2008, my professor, this great professor, another angel, said we were doing theories, and she's like, we're going to study 16 theories, 16 weeks. And here's, as a therapist, one of these theories is going to bonk you on the head. That's me. And for me, it was family systems. And family systems is almost more in the business world, it's like consulting, like walking into the room and watching all the parts and how they move and why. And that's really my thing. I love that, So I was like, oh, it's family systems. And she's like, guess what? Next semester, we're starting a master's in marriage and family therapy. You could be part of the first class. And I was like, huh, how about that? Sure. And so I did.
If you are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com. Definitely join Coop Plus. Let's get back to the podcast.
Another thing happened along the way. I was getting to the point where I had to do an internship. And one of my professors was the head of child and family services down in Arapahoe in Douglas County. And she'd always said, hey, when you're ready for an internship, just call me and let me know. And she's like, oh, and by the way, I speak fluent Spanish. This is part of my college experience was living in Spain. There's so many things I can tell you. So I sent her an email, not wanting to be intrusive, and then I never heard back from her. I'm like, oh, God damn it. Now I got to find an internship. And they're hard to find. They don't pay. And so I ended up doing a panel with a couple other students. And one of them was my friend Darcy. She's like, hey, what are you doing for your internship? I said, well, I emailed Janet, Dr. Goldstone, and I never heard back from her. She said, Kevin, I'm her assistant. And she gets 500 emails a day, you dummy. And I was just like, oh, she's like, send me your stuff. And within like 2 days, I had an internship.
Wow.
And
45-year-old intern.
They sat me down. They're like, at this point, how old was I? 47.
Oh, wow.
47-year-old marriage and family therapist, speaks Spanish, sober. And they're like, oh my God, I mean, where do you hide the unicorn? This is ridiculous, so I worked there and I did most of my internship in Spanish, actually, which was phenomenal. I had so much fun. And
is that the job that you had? I remember you talking to me about you had a job where when some kid crashed, you got a phone call. Was that the one?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
Sure. So I got the internship, blah, blah, blah. I got hired and they had a team. They had a team that was like the in-home intensive service. They call it intensive services. And what they would do is, because we're Medicaid based, when a kid under 18 was homicidal, suicidal, or psychotic and went to the ER because of those things, we got a call because it was our Medicaid is based like a lot of times by counties and that sort of thing. And it's not, so, I covered like 6, 7 hospitals and I would carry this phone 24 hours a day. And like, it's always 2 a.m, right? That's when they can never blow up at a good time. It's always when it's snowing at 2 a.m, like, come on, man. Or in the middle of the NBA finals, I'm like, come on. But I would get these calls and I'd bounce into these ERs and sit and talk with these kids. And the truth is 14-year-olds don't want to kill themselves. I mean, there's some do, but I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they don't, but 9 times out of 10, these kids were coming out of these horrible family situations where things were just really awful and they just had no other alternative. They were just like, no. And so we would put them at the head of the line to see a psychiatrist. We'd get them therapists. And the other thing we would do is go into their homes and do in-home family therapy for like, 2 or 3 hours at a time, 2 or 3 times a week, and help restructure the family system. And again, I liken a lot of this to being a consultant at a business. You walk in, you observe what's going on. You're like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm now going to come teach you how to do things differently.
Are there patterns you saw, like where you're like, oh, this again? Like, not like in that attitude, but just like, oh my gosh, like this seems to keep coming up in these cases.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, so much of it, was, I mean, here's the thing. I also don't, I mean, unless there were severe cases of neglect and abuse, I don't blame the parents. I mean, they're struggling. A lot of them were single. I mean, a lot of them were what we call oh, well, kinship adoption, where you had grandma and grandpa raising the child
Mm.
because, the mom or dad were gone or doing drugs or alcohol. I mean, so the pattern, sure, drugs and alcohol. I mean,
Mm.
that's the pattern across the board. Just that's a universal factor in the mental health world entirely. You shake it hard enough, it's going to come back to drugs and alcohol. And but I got real successful at this. I was part of this team. I really enjoyed it. Um, but then what I didn't enjoy was so for that job, I was making $38,000 a year,
Wow.
Wow.
and
At
I couldn't
47.
pay my bills.
Yeah.
That was 2013, 2014. So I started a private practice 1 day a week on the side, and that filled instantly. And then I opened up another day, and that filled instantly. And now I'm making more money in private practice than I am on my salary. So I quit. And then out of the blue, literally within a month of me quitting, and like, okay, here I go. You know, a buddy of mine in Boulder called me, and he owned a treatment center. He's like, "Hey, you see you in private practice?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "How would you feel about doing some contract work for me?" I'm like, "Well, what do you got in mind?" He's like, "I got like 20 families that are driving me crazy, and they need someone to talk to." Because I don't really need you to do family therapy. What I need you to do is push these families back and get them to start dealing with their own stuff, because their kid is in my treatment center, but they're trying to micromanage their kid,
Oh, wow.
and it's making my life miserable. And so, once again, when the time was right, someone showed up and said, "Here, let me give this to you."
What an incredible story,
Because
Kevin. I'm caught by the fact that your own story is it's foundational for, and it's parallel to the people that you serve now.
Yeah,
It's full circle.
yeah. So the irony is that's in 2014, right? So that's going on, starting this business and booming and taking off, and things are great. And then in February of that month, that year, 2000, yeah, January 2014, I get a Facebook instant message from this woman who I knew from AA meetings, and she says, "I have been watching you, and I would like to get to know you better." And I was like, "What do you want?" What is that? What does that mean? And she's like, "I want to go out with you." I'm like, "Okay." And so we started dating, and she's just wonderful. I mean, now we're married.
But
And
that's something a guy can't say. I've been watching you and
Yeah.
I'd like to get to know you more. That's
That
an
usually leads
automatic
to a
block.
restraining order. Yeah.
Yeah.
That usually leads to a restraining order.
and she makes fun of me. She's like, "I can't believe you said that." And I was like, "What the hell was I supposed to say?"
Right. It's kind of creepy.
What a great,
Oh
what a
man.
great direct line from her, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty
Oh,
cool.
and when she tells her story, she's like, "I just put all my chips in." I was like, "You know what? I like this guy. He seems like a really good guy." And she's like, "And I'm tired of just spinning my wheels and getting nowhere." And I was 50, and so. No, here's the funny part. She sends me that message because she's on her way to Cuba with her mother to go on a trip this is back when you could go to Cuba. And she's like, "So I want to go out with you, but I won't be back in Denver for like 3 weeks."
Wow.
I don't know if you're anything like me, Kevin, but if a woman doesn't take a really direct approach like that, I'll never get it. I'll never clue in.
Bang, and that's what I need. And so we start chatting and da da da, da, and she comes back, and so we fall in love. But here's how the rest of 2014 went. This is again back to your theme and your concept. Um, I have one sister who I adore, and she married a guy we grew up with from Palo Alto, and I've known him since I was in first grade. And in April of that year, so we started dating in February, and in April of that year, his dad died. Just like out of the blue, died. And then that's April. That's one. In July, my sponsor in AA, who'd been my very close, confident man, got me through my divorce. He died. And then my wife's mother found out she had leukemia at Memorial Day, and then she died at Labor Day. And then 10 days later, my brother-in-law's mother died. And 2 months later at Thanksgiving, my mom died.
Wow.
That's how our first year together went. We suffered 5 deaths in our family, super intense, close deaths in our family. So I have this track of success of working for myself and finding the love of my life. And then, I've got all this death and trauma happening. And it was just this really weird juxtaposition. So again, we're back to the angels, right? Um, God, in my estimation, brought me this wonderful woman who loved me and cared for me and needed me to love her and care for her as we went through this process together. And and she always says, we were forged together under fire, and we were living in her itty bitty little house in Denver, and she's like, we should probably buy a bigger house. And I was like, well, that's a great idea. I finally make money. I don't have any savings, and I'm still struggling getting myself back on track. And she's like, well, I have money as long as you can pay half the mortgage. I'm like, yeah, we can do that. So in January of 2015, we bought a house together in Denver. Um, and when we were doing the closing, she went to the bathroom. And I looked at the real estate agent. I said, "You're not going to come to the house, are you?" She's like, "No, why?" I said, "Because I'm going to propose when we go to the house." And she's like, "Oh my God, that's great." And so I did. We walked into this empty house, this big, beautiful empty house. It was built in 1964. It's one of those Denver houses you see everywhere. And we were walking around, and she turned around. I was on my knee, and I was like, "I have this ring, and I'd like you to be my wife." And she was like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Is that a yes?" And she's like, "Yes." And so we got engaged, and to be totally blunt, our story is not like, and then we didn't live ever happily ever after. Her family went into a deep battle over her mom's estate, and then that was really awful, and it caused a lot of trauma for her. And then we ended up, you guys will love this. We like going to Puerto Vallarta. We love going to Mexico. And we went to Puerto Vallarta, and then we were like, "Hey, we should get married here. This would be great." Well, it turns out to legally get married in Mexico, like really get married in Mexico, it's like an act of Congress. It's just impossible. I mean, literally, it's like chest X-rays and doctor visits, and you're like, "We're not doing that." So I said, "Let's just go to the city hall." And she's like, "Nope. If we're going to do that, we're going to Vegas and we're getting married by Elvis."
No way.
So on August 26th of 2016, we went to the Little Vegas Chapel and we got married by Elvis.
Oh my
We
gosh.
may have to have him send us a picture of that and have Andy put
Yeah,
that up
let's
on the
put that up on
podcast
the
post. That's
podcast
too
screen.
perfect.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've got. I, so so when you get married at the Little Vegas Chapel, let me tell you how it works. Because having been through the full wedding process, both of us, you go up on the website and you're like, "What day would you like to get married?" August 26th. Great. 11:20 or 11:40.
Oh gosh.
Don't linger.
We'll take 11:20. Great. Which package would you like? Videos? Would you like a video? Would you like it broadcast on the internet? Would you like pictures? Would you like flowers? Yes, 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 yes. Snap, snap, snap. Great. We'll see you that day.
Oh my, don't be
Wow.
late.
That's how we got.
Wow. So I have a
And
question. I have a couple questions for you. So
hit me.
AA fascinates me. AA is amazing and is responsible for saving a lot of lives. When you guys go through that trauma, 5 deaths in 1 year, is there something when you walk into AA and you say what's going on that makes alarm bells go off for people and you have support?
Yeah. So, yes. And let me tell you another little piece because it's going to answer that question. Okay. Um, So we get married. In 2017, her dad dies. And then that's when I was like, hey, I don't want to live in Colorado. I want to live at the ocean, blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah. We end up in here where we are now, Jacksonville Beach, Florida. In April of 2018, my wife goes in for a colonoscopy. And I'm sure, I don't know if you guys have had those before, but you know, it's pretty straightforward. The guy comes in, he's like, see you in 10 years. This guy came in and said, that's cancer. And tomorrow you're having a PET scan. And you know, that's gonna, you know, and then so she had colorectal cancer. And then she had, the next day we found out that she had kidney cancer also. So that was April of 2018. And so we spent the next 9 months in a course of chemo, radiation, major surgery. And then finding out, oh, we didn't get it all. So we're going to do the chemo, we're going to double chemo, and then you're going to have another major operation. So the answer to your question is, yeah, when we were going through all the trauma of the deaths in the family, oh yeah, we had people stand up for us. But you know, let me tell you that when my wife got diagnosed with cancer, and you know, I didn't know if that was she was going to die, you know. We had people show up out of the blue without asking from AA. And one of them was an angel named Jill, who I had actually sponsored her son in AA, and she was sober, and she had just retired as the chief nursing officer of Presbyterian St. Luke's.
Wow.
You know, and she's like, hey, Kevin, I understand you guys need some help. And I was like, yeah, we really do. And she's like, great, I'll be there tomorrow morning at 8. And what she would do is show up every morning and take my wife to radiation in her red Mercedes convertible. And my wife's like, now this is more like it. You know? And here's the funny thing, right? She's going down to the hospital. She trained every nurse in it.
Wow.
My wife was like, I just got VIP service at the radiation lab. Everybody knows Jill. Jill's the queen. And I was like, yeah, I love Jill. And Jill loves me because she says, you know, you saved my son's life. And I'm like, well, I didn't save his life. I was just there to help him. But so she was returning the favor. So for the next like 9 months, she would she'd do her knitting and listen to NPR. And then I could go to work, and she would like the nurses would come because my wife had an ileostomy, you know, like a colostomy bag, and they would come to, and all those people knew her. She was our angel. She made everything okay. And that's how AA works. We had other friends that brought meetings to the house because my wife couldn't leave the house, you know. And so people would come to the house and help us. They would cook food for us. They come clean the house. They come do the laundry. People that have been through this before, they know that you don't need another casserole. You know, I mean, it's very sweet. My wife had colorectal cancer, so she can't eat. So, you know, people are bringing us food. I'm like, thanks, but she can't eat that. But people that have been through it knew, and they would just be like, I'm coming over, and you can take off, and I'm going to take care of the house, or I'm going to walk the dogs, and I'm going to clean the house, and I'm going to do the laundry, and I'm going to do this. And you know, and you know, a friend of mine was like, here's the thing, everybody is like on your team for like 3 months, and then they kind of burn out and they go back to their life. People that have been through this, they get it, that the help, you really need the help starting at like 6 months, you know, and they show up, and they don't ask, you know, they don't call you and say, what do you need? One of the dogs. They don't call and say, what do you need? They just show up and they're like, I'm coming over and I'm handling business. And I was like, okay, cool. And we had those wonderful people that did that for us because they'd had it done for them. And honestly, it's really interesting is most of them would tell you, yeah, but Kevin, when I had one friend that was living in England and suffering from severe depression because she hated it. And she's like, you were the only person that would talk to me on the internet and you made it okay. So I feel like I'm just repaying the favor. And I was like, I didn't do that to get a marker, you know. I did that because I love you and you're my friend and you were in need. She's like, yeah, well, same thing.
Mm.
And so oh God, it just makes me all, and they were just wonderful, kind people. And in the midst of all that, we ended up buying a condo out here. And one of the one of the chemo drugs my wife was taking is it's called oxyplatin, and it makes you super sensitive to anything cold. Like air conditioning would send her into shock.
Mm.
And this was like October in Denver, so we're starting to spin into and so she's and so we bought the condo a block from the ocean here in 2018, and she really couldn't come, so I came out here and like bought the furniture and got the place up and running. And then her final surgery was the week of Christmas 2018, and she had to stay in the hospital for a week. And And then 6 weeks later, we came out here. She came out for her first real visit without her colostomy stuff. And by day 3, she's like, yeah, I'm not moving back to Denver. We're walking on the beach every day with the dogs. It's 70 degrees, and in Denver, it's 20. And I can't go outside because by the way, just to let you know, when somebody has cancer, just because they're all done doesn't mean they're all done.
Yeah.
It goes on for a couple of years, the chemo after effects and everything for at least a couple of years. But that's how we got here. And you know what happened when we got here? Started going to AA meetings, and these people were like, "Hey, how's it going? Where are you from? Denver. Great. Oh, how come you're here? Well, da, 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 my wife, da, da, da." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, great, cool." So, and then the next thing we knew, we had made best friends with this couple, these two guys in AA that have stayed and remained our best friends. And they adopted us and took care of us and walked us through everything and showed us what we needed and how to get. They were just God put them in our lives, and away we went.
You talk about the angels that appear from time to time, and the word that keeps coming to my mind when I think about you and your story is that you are an empath.
Yeah.
You are, and I think that you attract that like-mindedness into your life, and that's where these angels come from. These people who are willing to come in and care for you and your wife as she's going through this horrific battle, and that is such a unique and extraordinary gift to possess, and it's an extraordinary gift to receive. Do you resonate with that? I mean, does that seem?
Oh, you're like bullseye. I mean, and in the moment of crisis, you're not thinking rationally, right? And then these people that have been there before, which is the key ingredient, show up and they're like, "We got this. You can take it down. We got you. We have totally got you." And they're kind and they're loving, and like you said, they're empathetic, and they've been through it before. One of the foundational concepts of AA is, you know, um, I know where you've been, and I know how to get out of that hole. So let me show you. You got to do the work, but I'll do it with you. And let me show you the path and the way out to salvation. And it's the same thing. It's the absolute same thing. Let me show you the path. And people, it's really funny when people ask me about my marriage or my wife, or how did you well, what's the thing, what's the deal, how did you know? And we weren't in our 20s.
Sure.
I was 50 when we met and she was 45. And the thing I will always tell you is I find my wife incredibly attractive, but she is the kindest, nicest, most warm, loving person I've ever met in my entire life. And she's incredibly kind and loving towards me. And that's just something I probably have experienced in previous relationships. I just wasn't aware of it or wasn't there for it. But 10 years of being with Amy, that's just the deal. She's just, I can go to her and be like, oh, I totally screwed up and I'm in trouble financially. Okay, we'll figure it out.
Isn't it amazing how life prepares you for life? I'm just following the chronology of your life, and it's just one example of life preparing you for the next phase of life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, then this funny thing happened. So we moved here in 2019, and we bounced back and forth to Denver. We rented a house in Denver, and everything happened nicely. And then a really funny thing happened in 2020. This COVID thing happened, and my wife's is a high risk, right? She's
Sure.
she's still dealing with the after effects, and so we had to be super careful. And she's like, well, if we're going to be trapped somewhere, let's be trapped at the beach, and we had two dogs, and then we had two dogs, Bert and Blanche. Oh, they're gone. They're both Boston Terriers. They're cousins. Um, and um, about three-quarters of the way through, like August, September, a friend of mine in Denver is like, "Hey, I'm getting a Boston Terrier puppy." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's great." And she's like, "Yeah, my parents live in Decatur, Alabama, and there's a woman who breeds them there." And I was like, "Oh, that's amazing." And I told my wife, I'm like, "Hey, get a load of this. My friend Stacy's getting a Boston Terrier puppy, and she lives in Decatur, Alabama, and there's a breeder." Da, 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 da. And 24 hours later, my wife,
Oh my God.
she's like, so I called the breeder. I'm like, "How did you find out who it was?" Decatur, Alabama, breeder, And she's like, "And if they have an extra puppy, they're not born yet, but if she has an extra puppy, we're gonna get it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And that puppy's name is Stella. And Stella is all white. And in Boston Terrier world, that means you're born deaf. So we have a little special needs, pandemic puppy named Stella, who's just the cutest thing on the planet. And we got through the pandemic, and then in 2021, my dad died. My dad died in July of 2021, and that was that was really, what, I didn't think it was. I thought I was going to be like, oh, he's the only one left, and it was devastating to me. It was absolutely devastating to me. And my dad and I, we had that 6 months of connection, and then we had a really prickly relationship. Very very traditional. Like sort of weird, like never going to allow you to be more important than me type of person. And I
Mm,
was like, oh, okay. Um, he was very proud of me, but he'd never tell me.
wow.
He'd always tell other people. You know, his one of his famous statements was, "I just can't believe people pay money to talk to you. I just
Oh my
understand that." And
Wow.
I was
gosh.
like, "Thanks, Dad."
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, I was just like, okay. And I think in his mind he was like, "Wow, isn't that amazing?" But what it came out as is,
Yeah.
"I just can't believe that happened." Like,
It's an
pretty.
extraordinary tale, Kevin. It's just so fascinating to watch your life evolve. And I guess, we're over an hour into this, and I feel like we could go another hour. No, no, no. You're doing. This is phenomenal. This is one of my favorite episodes so far because your story is so compelling, and it's just this journey from where you
Yeah,
are. One of the
yeah.
things we like to do is tell people how to get in touch with you. But what I'd really like to do is tell people how to get a hold of your books, and then
Oh,
we'll flash images of your books on the screen when this broadcast. But I think it would be great for people to. Um, Obviously, you work professionally as a counselor or therapist, so that's a whole different way of connecting. But if people wanted to connect with you, maybe the books would be a great way to start.
sure. So they're both under, one's called Chronic Hope, Parenting the Addicted Child, and I'll send you guys the media for it.
Perfect.
And Chronic Hope, Families and Addiction. They're both on Amazon, Audible, and Kindle.
Well, we'll
Uh,
use that as a way for people to get in touch with you because I think anyone who listens to this is going to want to know a little bit more about your story and then the work that you do.
so you can go to my website, which is chronichope.us. I have an active YouTube channel,
Yeah.
the Chronic Hope Institute, and then an active Instagram. I haven't been able to unlock how to make those things work financially. So I just put stuff up there because, like, I am done trying to be like the next kingpin of Instagram.
Yeah.
Dude, I
I
love the
lost
videos
it.
you do though. The videos are amazing. Like you do a really
Thank
good
you.
job bringing information to people, and just the fact that anybody can get to it is super cool.
You
Yeah.
send us all your links and we'll put them all up on the screen
Yeah.
as this broadcast. We'd love to give people many ways to connect with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. And if you want to, we can do another episode if you want.
I know.
We might have
We
to.
might do a part 2 on this one.
I mean, I'm like, oh, there's so much. Every time I tell you a story, I'm like, oh yeah, and then da 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 da.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I've been, here's the thing, right? Is I've been blessed. I've been very fortunate, and
Sure.
and I'm not selling religion or anything. I'll just tell you that when I made myself available, honestly, in my heart, and wanted to do this, the doors have opened.
Mhm.
The doors have opened, and I have a friend, a mentor of mine, passed away in and this is the guy. This guy in the 50s woke up in jail again, and he's like, "Hey, when am I getting out?" And the guard was like, "Probably never. You killed 2 people in a blackout, and driving on the sidewalk." That guy retired as a warden in the North Carolina state prison system.
Wow.
Whoa.
And he talks about when God has work for you to do, all you have to do is show up. He will make it happen. You don't have to worry about everything. You don't have to be like, but how do I, and my resume?
Mhm.
He's like, no, 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 no. You just show up. He'll take care of everything else. And that's been my experience. Just show up. Just show up and be yourself. And then it'll work.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have a treatment center that I work for now in Colorado that is an amazing place. And it was because of a conversation I had with a friend of mine that works there. It's like, God, you know what I'd really like to do in a perfect world? I'd love to just work with families whose kids were in treatment. And then 2 weeks later, I had a job offer,
That's
Just
and I was
show
like,
up.
oh,
That's going to rival me for the theme of lessons from last time. I like to tell people the theme of lessons from last time is get back up, because that's kind of been my story, and that's been the story of a lot of it's partially your story. You get back up from adversity, but just show up
Just
is a
show
pretty
up.
compelling
Yeah.
tagline as well. That's powerful stuff.
and my wife and I mean, I must think, at some point it should be the two of us because, we met, we fell in love, 5 deaths in the family. And then cancer, and then her dad dies of cancer, and it's just been one. I mean, it's just like I think at one point we looked at each other like, at what point do we get like 1 year of just no
Yeah.
crisis,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
and no drama, and it's actually kind of been like this year,
Mm.
We'd like a sabbatical from deaths in
Yeah.
the family. Yeah.
well, there's nobody left. I mean, it's going to be my generation now.
Yeah.
But,
All right. I've got one final question for you, Kevin.
okay,
So
bring it.
we end every episode with this question. You have lived quite a life. This has been a huge adventure. I mean, so many things. If you got to go back to a playground where you ran into 10-year-old Kevin Petersen on the playground, and you get to walk up to him knowing everything you know now from all of these years, you get to walk up to 10-year-old Kevin, give him one piece of advice. What do you say to that kid?
Oh my gosh, I want to say something really deep and philosophical. But the other part of me is like, oh yeah, no, go kiss that girl.
That's pretty deep and
Don't-
philosophical.
Yeah, don't chicken out. You know, okay, because I remember myself at 10. Believe in yourself.
Hmm.
And not like, you're gonna cure cancer, but like you're okay. I mean, as a kid, I was freaking terrified, and just the world terrified me, and I just didn't know where to go and what to do. And I'd just be like, "You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. Just do what you want, and you're gonna be okay." And truth is, that kid's gonna become an alcoholic anyway. That's, to me, I believe in the genetic makeup. And I wouldn't be like, "Don't drink alcohol." I love drinking alcohol. and that's not going to be the truth, but the truth is you're going to be okay. Just keep going, and it's going to be okay. Oh, okay. And here's the other one. In 1984, when your dad introduces you to Pete Uberoth, and Pete Uberoth says, "Oh, if you want a job at the Olympics, you can come work in my office. Say yes." I was like, I'm not taking charity from my dad's friend.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
That's what I would tell myself. Don't be an idiot. Take the job.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I have a feeling if you took your own advice and just you believe in yourself, then you are just going to show up and you're probably going to kiss the girl, and it's going to lead to the good things. And you know,
we're gonna end this on anybody that comments below. What I'm gonna be looking for, Kevin, is I want to do a part 2 of this, and I want to dive into, because I've seen you do this before. I want people to send us questions, and I want us to bring you on, and we can start asking some questions about addiction, about parenting through addiction, all that stuff, and then we'll bring you on again, and that's what we'll deal with in our next conversation.
And mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have to be anything mental health, addiction related.
Yeah,
I would love that. I would love that.
You know, Kevin, it's always great when we do these, because either we both know the person that we're talking to, and it could be live here in studio, it could be Zoom like this, or I know them well, or Ken knows them well. And I always am fascinated when we interview somebody like you who Ken has a relationship with and I don't, because I get to meet these extraordinary people. And I'm so grateful for your willingness to be on the podcast today and share your story with us.
Yep.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my honor. I love it. You know, I mean, I love Ken. I think he's amazing, and you know, it's just an honor to participate in anything like this. And you know, I mean, I love talking about myself. Trust me. Let's be clear. You know, I still have that going on. But,
well, dude, your wife's gonna be pissed if we hold you any longer. You got to go do your hair and your beard. What's David Sedaris you're seeing tonight?
Yeah, David Sedaris is in downtown.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, dude, go have fun, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, brother.